The walls of the Grant household seemed carved from perfection. Every hallway carried the polished gleam of framed certificates, glistening trophies, and photographs where smiles looked choreographed, frozen in time like fragile porcelain. Adrian, Julian, and Noah grew up under that gaze, triplets, born into a home where excellence wasn't celebrated. It was required. Their father, Grant, was a former football champion who coached like he was still chasing a title. Their mother, Elaine, was the town's most admired psychologist, the voice people sought when their own lives cracked. Yet within their own house, she stitched silence across anything that hinted at imperfection. From their farce depths, the boys were told to stand tall, be worthy, never flinch. Strong men don't cry, their father often repeated, like a sermon. Strong men win. So they played the roles expected of them. Adrian became the unstoppable quarterback, Julian the quiet genius, Noah the steady honor student. Their lives ticked forward like perfectly wound clocks. But clocks can hide cracks. And behind the flawless photographs, each of them carried a truth that trembled inside their ribs. They didn't tell each other. They didn't dare. Because they had learned early what love in their family meant: applause when they performed, silence when they faltered. Love had rules. And the greatest rule was this: don't give anyone a reason to think you are different. Then Skyler arrived. He appeared in the school hallway like a spark catching dry leaves. Silver ash hair that caught the light, storm gray eyes that didn't dart nervously like everyone else's. And on his jacket, a small rainbow pin that shimmered like rebellion. While others walked with shoulders hunched, Skyler glided, untouched by the gravity of fear. His presence felt like music turned up in a silent room, and something broke inside them. Adrian felt his chest tighten in the same way it did before a winning touchdown. But it wasn't adrenaline, it was wonder. Julian's thoughts tangled like guitar strings plucked out of tune, trying to translate the ache in his chest into melody. Noah simply stared, breath caught, as if seeing proof that being unapologetically alive was possible. They said nothing, but they felt everything. And that was enough to plant chaos in the quiet. At dinner, they spoke of grades and goals, yet their eyes betrayed them, flickering with something too bright. Their father didn't notice, too busy mapping out Adrian's next football drills. But Elaine noticed. She always did. And her gaze lingered on them with the soft, wary fear of someone who senses a storm forming on a horizon others call clear. That night, each of them lay awake in their separate rooms, ceiling shadows dancing like questions. They had all felt the same gravitational pull, and they all knew the same truth they could not let their parents find out. In this house, even love had to pass inspection. But hearts don't obey rules. And for the first time, the three golden sons of the Grant family were bound not by shared victories, but by a secret powerful enough to burn the world they had been built to uphold. If you believe no one should ever have to hide their heart, stay with Heart's story, because this story has only just begun. Days began to stretch like fragile glass beneath their feet, holding steady on the surface while fine fractures spread underneath. Julian slipped into the music room every night when the house went still, letting his fingers drift across strings in search of a language that didn't require courage to speak. He wrote chords the way some people breathe, soft, aching, unspoken. His notebook filled with fragments of a song he never named, but always imagined playing for Skyler beneath a sky clear enough to finally be honest. Adrian, on the other hand, went louder. He invited Skyler to the team's victory party, flashing his confident grin like armor, desperate to seem untouchable. On the field, he carried the ball as if he could outrun the turmoil in his chest. Around teammates, he spoke with the swagger they expected, all while cataloging every detail of Skyler's quiet laughter in the corner of the room, the way it seemed to cut through the noise like sunlight piercing water. Noah chose the quieter path, as he always did. He stayed after school to help Skyler study for their philosophy exam, sliding pages of carefully written notes across the library table. He watched Skyler's brow furrow and smooth again, watched how concentration softened into warmth, and said nothing. He didn't dare reach for more than what he was quietly allowed. Each of them believed they were moving silently, but their house had always been too small to contain secrets. At the dinner table, the air grew tense like the pause before a whistle blows. Their father, Grant, eyed them with the precision of a coach spotting weakness in a play. "You've lost focus," he remarked one night, voice clipped. A true student, a real athlete, doesn't let distractions pull him off course. Elaine forced a smile, the kind she gave her patients when trying to mask worry, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. She had noticed their lingering glances, their distracted silences. Later, when the boys had scattered to their rooms, she found Julian in the hallway and lowered her voice to a whisper meant to vanish in air. "The world won't be kind to boys who stand out," she murmured, her words trembling on the edge between warning and fear. Julian stood frozen, the strings of his guitar still buzzing faintly in his memory. He nodded, though she hadn't asked him to, and he carried her fear back into his room like a weight he didn't choose but couldn't set down. From then on, even the simplest moments cracked under pressure. Their once synchronized lives faltered, rhythms clashing like cymbals out of time. Noah, seated between his brothers, began to feel the invisible war forming across the table, the sideways glances, the sudden silences when Skyler's name hovered unspoken in the air. At night, he lay awake, not thinking of Skyler's smile, but of Grant's voice echoing like thunder, "Strong men win." What would his father call them if he saw what beat in their chests? What would their mother do if she knew her sons had stepped outside the narrow script she had written for their futures? Noah began to feel like a bridge collapsing under its own weight. One side pulled toward the fragile glow of new love, the other anchored by the cold shadow of rejection. It was no longer just about Skyler. It was about survival. And in that tension, something unspoken began to twist between the brothers, reshaping them. Not into rivals yet, not enemies, but no longer allies either. Sometimes, love does not explode. Sometimes, it erodes quietly, invisibly until even the strongest bonds begin to splinter. The day unraveled like a thread yanked too hard. Afternoon light slanted through the school courtyard, dust swirling in the air like unsettled thoughts. Julian arrived first, clutching his guitar case so tightly his knuckles blanched. He had spent the night rewriting his song, stripping it down to its rawest truth, hoping the melody would carry what his voice could not. He imagined Skyler listening in stillness, hearing every hidden word he was too afraid to say. Adrian came next, stepping out of his car with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, a bouquet of fresh white roses in his arms. He had spent the entire morning in the florist's shop, asking the clerk which flowers meant new beginnings, which looked bold enough to erase hesitation. He had convinced himself this gesture would make everything simple visible, undeniable. Noah emerged from the library, clutching a stack of neatly organized philosophy notes tied with twine. He had rewritten every concept Skyler had struggled with, circling key ideas, adding quiet encouragement in the margins. He told himself this was enough, that care didn't have to be loud to be real. They converged on the same bench outside the music wing, each startled to see the others, their steps faltering like players who realize too late they are on opposing teams. Julian blinked at Adrian's flowers. Adrian's jaw tensed at Noah's bundle of notes. Noah's heart lurched at the sight of Julian's guitar. Words erupted before any of them could stop them. They accused, defended, mocked. Their voices rose in jagged bursts, overlapping, splintering. The air around them felt sharp, as if even the sunlight had turned to glass. And then Skyler appeared. His gray eyes widened, confusion flickering like a candle's last breath. He froze for a heartbeat, taking in the scene, the roses trembling in Adrian's fists, the pages crumpling in Noah's grip, the guitar strap slipping from Julian's shoulder, and then he turned away. No anger, no explanation, just a quiet exit, his silver hair catching the light like a falling star before vanishing around the corner. Silence swallowed everything. That night, Grant found a photograph on the hallway floor. half hidden beneath the edge of the sofa. Skyler's face stared up from it, sharp, luminous, undeniable. Grant's hands clenched as if the paper had burned him. His voice tore through the house like a siren. This is what's making you weak, a flimsy, soft little boy. Pathetic, fragile thing. Julian stood rooted to the floor, color draining from his face. Is this why you're slipping? Because you want to be like that? Julian didn't answer. He couldn't. Grant's fury detonated. He banned Julian from leaving the house, declared him unfit to be trusted. Adrian's protest only fueled the fire. Grant suspended him from practice indefinitely, calling him distracted, disloyal to the team. Noah tried to stay invisible, but Elaine cornered him in the kitchen, her voice breaking as she begged him not to ruin everything by following his brothers down the same reckless path. By midnight, their house felt gutted. Julian's guitar lay silent in its case. Adrian's cleats sat abandoned at the foot of his bed. Noah sat at his desk, Skyler's notes unopened, Elaine's trembling words still rattling inside his skull. They gathered in Julian's room not because they wanted to, but because they had nowhere else to go. No one spoke. No one cried. They just sat, staring at nothing. Lungs tight, chests hollow, like statues carved from shame. The love that had sparked between them and Skyler hadn't destroyed them. What destroyed them was the weight of living a truth that their family treated like a flaw. Sometimes what shatters a family isn't rebellion. It's fear, the fear of who someone might become if they are allowed to be whole. The house turned hollow after that night, as if someone had opened a door and let all the color escape. Mornings passed like empty corridors, Grant barking orders, Elaine pressing fake smiles onto her face, while the three brothers moved like shadows of themselves. Julian stopped touching his guitar entirely. The calluses on his fingertips faded, leaving his hands soft, almost unfamiliar, as if they no longer belonged to the boy who once played until his wrists ached. Adrian drifted through practice days without showing up, his jersey crumpled in the bottom of his bag while his teammates whispered. And Noah shredded the flashcards he had written for Skyler, their confetti of torn paper scattered like fallen leaves across his floor. Each retreated deeper into silence, not out of defiance but out of exhaustion. They had carried the weight of wanting, and it had cracked them open. Now they wore emptiness like armor. Then the storm came. Not a storm of rain, but of darkness. One evening, the power flickered, then died. The house exhaled into blackness, the hum of electricity vanishing until only the sound of their own breathing remained. Elaine lit a single candle in the kitchen, its light wavering like a fragile heartbeat. Before retreating to her bedroom, Grant grumbled about circuit breakers and disappeared into the garage. The brothers drifted toward the living room almost by instinct, drawn by the faint glow. They sat on the old couch that had once been the center of every family gathering, now just a worn monument to everything they were supposed to be. The candlelight etched their faces in trembling gold. For a long time, no one spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, it was brittle, like the pause before something finally gives. Then Noah's voice slipped out, barely more than a tremor. "I wasn't jealous of you two because of Skyler," he said, eyes fixed on the flame. "I was jealous because you were brave enough to try. I've never even done that. I've never dared to be real." Julian's lips parted, then closed again. He stared at his own hands, fingers still shaped like they were holding a guitar. Adrian's shoulders sagged, the practice confidence gone. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't an apology. It was something quieter, the sound of truth uncoiling after being caged too long. Julian's breath hitched, and before he could stop it, tears slid down his cheeks, silent, stunned tears, like rain falling on scorched ground. He tried to turn away, but Adrian reached out. Without a word, Adrian pulled both of them close, arms circling their shaking shoulders. They stayed like that, tangled and still, listening to the candle crackle. "If Mom and Dad never accept us," Adrian whispered, "not as a challenge but as a vow, then we will accept each other." For the first time in weeks, The air didn't feel poisonous. The walls didn't feel like cages. Something small but unbreakable sparked in the darkness. Not defiance, not victory, just love stripped of fear. And in that fragile glow, they understood what their parents had never taught them. Strength wasn't proving yourself to the world. It was standing beside one another when the world refused to see you. The morning of the championship game bloomed bright and merciless, sunlight slicing through the bleachers like sharpened glass. The stands were already humming, waves of cheers rolling across the field as Adrian jogged toward the locker room, helmet dangling from his hand like a question he hadn't answered. Julian stood off to the side, clutching a water bottle, pretending to watch warm-ups while his eyes stayed distant. Noah sat cross-legged near the sideline with a notebook balanced on his knee. Not writing, just holding it like an anchor. They hadn't spoken about Skyler in weeks. It was as if they had silently agreed to bury everything: the music, the roses, the late-night study sessions under layers of routine. Adrian had returned to practice. Julian forced his hands back to the guitar strings until the ache returned. Noah filled his days with academics, stacking achievements like bricks to wall off whatever was left of the boy who once believed love could be gentle. Grant and Elaine sat high in the bleachers, rigid as statues, their gazes sweeping over the field with the clinical pride of curators inspecting an exhibit. They looked like parents again, but only from far away. And then Skyler appeared. He stepped onto the field with a stride so steady it seemed to quiet the noise around him. The crowd's cheers dulled to murmurs. His silver ash hair caught the light like a blade, and on his shoulder, draped loosely yet defiantly, fluttered a rainbow flag. Behind him, three figures trailed. Grant and Elaine froze when they recognized their own son standing motionless on the grass as Skyler walked toward them. Skyler stopped at the center line, pulled a folded envelope from his jacket, and held it out to the brothers. "I never chose any of you," he said, not loud, not harsh, just enough for their world to hear. "Because I didn't come here to be chosen. I came to remind you that none of you should ever have to hide your hearts." Grant shifted, but his words caught in his throat. Elaine's hand hovered near her mouth. Skyler stepped closer, spreading the rainbow flag across their shoulders. Adrian on one side, Julian in the middle, Noah on the other. The fabric settled like a mantle, warm and weightless all at once. "Your father feared you wouldn't be real men," Skyler continued, eyes steady. "But today you are the bravest men I've ever known." Something cracked, not like shattering glass, but like ice thawing. Grant's jaw trembled. Elaine's tears slid soundless down her cheeks. Around them, the silence fractured into applause, rising, multiplying, until the whole stadium seemed to roar. Julian reached for Noah's hand. Adrian lifted the edge of the flag high above their heads. The sunlight caught it, spilling color across their faces. And for the first time, they weren't rivals clawing for the same love. They were three brothers standing together, not asking for permission to exist, claiming it. They had spent their lives being told to be strong like men. Only now did they realize strength was never about denying who they were. It was about daring to stand side by side, seen, whole, and unafraid. Would you have had the courage to stand under that flag? Comment, be proud. If you believe no one should ever have to hide their heart, and follow Heart Stories for more stories of love, courage, and becoming who you truly are.